Hello, fellow members of the Midnight Society. Welcome back to another episode review from the show Are You Afraid of the Dark? Last time, we covered The Tale of the Magician's Assistant, a Gary story about a teen who gets a job working for a magician only to find out that magic is real. Tonight's narrative, from David, is about a brother and sister sent to a boarding school only to find out that the headmaster is hiding a dangerous secret. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call this Season 2, Episode 12, The Tale of the Hatching. We open on David, sitting at the campfire alone. He looks depressed, as though Kristen just dumped him for Gary. The rest of the gang arrive, asking what's wrong and, showing some empathy, except for good old Frank, who quickly turns on the person who got him into the Midnight Society in the first place.
What's the matter? Poor Davey upset about something?
It turns out that David's parents moved across town, and now he's at a new school. Kiki gives him a hard time until he explains why he's upset. He claims that being the new kid means you're invisible, because everyone else already has friends. He then sits down like a weirdo and says that he figured he'd better make the best of it, so he came up with a story. I'm sorry, I can't let it go. It would be one thing if he put his hands on his knees to sit down and ended up like that, but he sits normal and then positions himself like he's going to take a painful shit. The tale begins with a dog seemingly kidnapped by the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in front of a boarding school. David gives some narration explaining that the Blackbrook School is supposed to be one of the best boarding schools around, prompting the Wilsons to take their kids there when they had to go away on business. Just gotta get rid of those parents somehow, eh? Are you afraid of the Dark Riders?
Of course!
I'm not sure I buy this intro. I mean, I was raised by a single parent who moved around a lot for work, and when she went somewhere, I went somewhere. If both parents are going somewhere for work short term, you'd probably just leave the kids with family or pay someone to watch them while they continue attending the same school. And if the parents are going away long enough that that's not a possibility, you'd probably just take the kids with you. Boarding schools are not cheap, and if it's only temporary, you wouldn't want to go through enrollment, which can be a pain, especially if the year's already begun. I mean, not that I blame these parents for trying to get away. Kids suck. I know, I used to be one. We meet the Wilsons, including our two main characters, Augie and his sister Jasmine, who he calls Jazz. Jazz? Mr. Wilson asks the kids what they think of the school, prompting Augie to say,
"Classic post-industrial pre-war construction."
Say what now? I'm going to yield the floor to the distinguished gentleman from Springfield. Jazz has a completely different opinion about the school.
Don't try and sweet talk me.
Sorry, wrong Jazz. I certainly hope that doesn't keep happening. Anyway, she says it looks like a pit. On the way to meet the headmaster, Jazz asks the same question I did. Why can't they go with their parents? The mother replies that they don't want to disrupt school. What do you think changing schools is? How is this any different than moving and starting in a new school somewhere else? If you feel so strongly, just take them with and homeschool them. There's probably some kind of a magical tutoring nanny out there just waiting for an offer letter to show up in a breeze, and I'll bet she'd be cheaper than a boarding school. Rumor is she gets paid on the smug satisfaction that she's better than you.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Mr. Wilson is in the middle of saying how respected the school is when he hears screaming. The Wilsons rush to investigate, finding a girl in bed who was screaming as the result of a nightmare. Jazz finds it odd that she was sleeping in the middle of the day, but before we can learn anything else, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, the apparently only members of the faculty here at the school, arrive, claiming that the girl, Marie, has been suffering from a fever, prompting Augie to chime in with,
Delusionary dreams are often caused by elevated temperatures.
Does anyone else find it odd that Augie looks like Gary but sounds like David? Maybe I've had this love triangle thing wrong this whole time. Maybe David's in love with Gary, not Kristen. He sure has featured his name and likeness in all his stories lately. Mrs. Taylor escorts Marie to the infirmary as the following sound starts playing over the school's speakers. Mr. Taylor explains the sound signifies class change and invites everyone to his office. As everyone else leaves, Augie hangs around a moment, looking around the room suspiciously before fingering a globe. That didn't sound right. The spinning globe, it turns out, was just to do one of the worst transitions I've seen on the show. I mean, there should have been like a zoom in and a blackout on the small globe and then a pullback to reveal the bigger one. And they've done similar transitions on the show before, making this one feel just real lazy. It appears that Augie is the one spinning the globe in Mr. Taylor's office, showing us that it's not just the small ones. Augie enjoys fingering balls of all sizes.
Free. Wait, are we
still doing phrasing?
While Mr. Taylor explains that at Blackbrook an orderly environment is essential to learning, that weird tone plays over the speakers again, prompting Jazz to ask, "What's with the buzzing?" Mr. Taylor says it's their tone system used to alert students of class changes, meal times, etc. Augie continues to prove why he's wearing glasses and plaid by saying,
Different frequencies for different events?
Mr. Taylor says that the tones are soothing, but after only hearing it twice, I want to poke my eardrums out. Anyway, an alarm goes off on Augie's watch, which causes Mr. Taylor to have the following reaction. As sketch as the whole situation is, Mr. Taylor plays it off fairly well, claiming that he's been having migraines. We cut to the hallway where Jazz is having none of this school, asking the same questions I'd be asking.
Man, I'm starving. When do we eat here?
Sorry, I really should have eaten before starting this. Jazz asks her brother why he just goes along with everything without a fight, and why Mr. Taylor flipped out in his office. Augie says it's because he has a headache, but Jazz counters with that she thought his brain was going to explode. Little foreshadowing, perhaps? Anyway, Augie stops his sister and says,
If Mom and Dad could take us with them, they would. But they can't, so get over it.
what a sweet guy. Anyway, we also learn that the parents are going away for 6 months. I want to know what job requires both parents to go away for that length of time. At least in the Tale of the Lonely Ghost, he explained that the parents were scientists going to study Inuit stone carvings. You know how scientists do. Anyway, the scene ends with Jazz setting up some comedy hijinks.
Well, I'm not wearing one of those lame wand uniforms.
Wait, the parents waited for them to get sized up, issued uniforms, and then change into those uniforms before they took off? Bizarre. Anyway, before the parents drive off, Mrs. Wilson says,
See you in about a month.
So they're not going that far away if they're coming back to visit in a month out of their 6-month trip. I have so many issues with the reason for these kids being here. In fact, I hope you're ready for a long-winded rant because forgive me. I've been having migraines. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, watch out. The tone sounds for dinner, and we cut to the dining room where every table is passing around a big bowl of something they call sponge with a U, which makes it extreme, I guess. I don't know. I mean, this was the 90s. Augie examines the contents of the bowl and says,
Some sort of grain meal, like grits.
No, it's not like grits. That's grits. A boy at their table says that it doesn't look great, but that it tastes good, and they get it every night for dessert. I feel like a lot of kids wouldn't be interested in trying plain grits for dessert to find out whether they're delicious or not, so how did you get everyone on board? Aw, cookies for dessert again? Have no fear, Sponge is here! No, not that kind of sponge. This sponge is spelled with a U, for ultimate. From the makers of Corn Rackies, this dessert may look bland, but it's infused, soaked, coated, and sprinkled with high fructose corn syrup. So get your mouth on some sponge today. Both Augie and Jazz decide to pass on the sponge, which is clearly an anti-drug message. Or an anti-cleaning message. I'm not really sure. A tone sounds indicating the end of dinner, and while everyone else is cleaning up, this happens. There's a lot of kids fingering things in this episode. Also, I haven't been this offended on a food item's behalf since Josh did the same thing to that innocent bowl of pudding in the Tale of Laughing in the Dark. We transition to another day where David is giving some exposition about how the kids at school were pretty cool, so Augie and Jazz decide to try and fit in, but the school does have some strange rules. Augie witnesses Mr. Taylor, who is apparently being overcome by the vapors, confiscating a handheld game system that makes beeping noises. Later that night, Augie is getting ready to listen to his Walkman. Really? Wow, not even a Discman? Okay, looks like it's time for another
Old-timey history lesson. The Walkman was an archaic device used by early man to listen to music on the go. Some believe the cassette tapes played music using magnetic particles on the tape itself that would be passed through a magnetic head, creating the sound recorded on it through speakers or headphones. Though, more likely, it captured the souls of the musicians within and forced them to perform songs at will in order to be spared a worse fate.
One of the other kids tells Augie not to let anyone see the Walkman because they're not allowed to listen to music on school grounds. Is the school located in the town from Footloose?
Hey, let's Watch that attitude, boy.
We transition to another dinner shot, and this time, Augie is about to try some of the sponge, but Jazz shoots him a look, prompting him to back down like a scared puppy. Why would she care what he eats? I mean, we, as viewers, know that something is up here, but they don't. I mean, David even says,
After a couple of weeks, they got used to the rules and even started to like the place.
We then cut to a night shot where the tones start playing while the kids are sleeping. All the students, aside from Jazz, stand and start heading somewhere in a very zombie-like fashion. Jazz follows until she sees Augie amongst them. At first, it looks like he's a zombie too, but Augie reveals that he's faking it to find out where everyone else was going. Clever girl. Or boy. Clever boy. Augie wants to tell the Taylors, but Jazz wants to follow the kids to see where they're going. The two fall in line, pretending to mindlessly walk with everyone else, but at one point, Augie starts to have second thoughts, though Jazz convinces him through the power of peer pressure.
Do it!
The kids head down to the basement? Question mark? There's large pools of water with egg-shaped pods floating in each pool. The zombie kids begin adding some sort of powder to the water. Jazz bravely reaches in and pulls out one of the pods, discovering that it is in fact a large egg, and I'll bet that egg would make one hell of an omelet. Omelet. Sorry. This is why you don't film while you're hungry. It's soon revealed that the Taylors are behind everything that's going on. They show up to specifically see if Augie and Jazz are falling in line. The two kids pretend like they are, fooling the Taylors.
Thank goodness. I didn't think they were eating their sponge.
That's not my fault, dude. I marketed the hell out of that sponge. With the Taylors convinced, Jazz and Augie are able to follow them back to the headmaster's office to find out what's happening. The Taylors say their work is going to pay off and that the incubation period is nearly complete. They then share some sponge out of the world's largest martini glass before Mrs. Taylor says,
The master is pleased.
Oh, It was a Doctor Who episode the whole time? What a great twist, David! The Taylors reveal that they're some kind of reptilian creatures wearing human skin, and what a great effect. It looks so creepy when Mr. Taylor is scratching the scales under the skin. The Taylors then make a toast to the master before drinking some Nickelodeon slime out of some regular-sized martini glasses. Boy, someone had martinis on the brain while writing this one, eh, DJ?
That's the kind of story I like to write.
Augie and Jazz head back to the dorms, speculating on what the Taylors are. Jazz doesn't really care, just wants to get out and tell someone, but Augie decides to have a mental break instead.
We can't! They'll catch us!
Jazz is having none of it and says,
Then what you gonna do? Bake some cookies? Hem a dress?
I'm sorry, okay? Now that joke has run its course, Augie's fiery little sister says,
I am going to go get dressed. You get a grip.
I appreciate the intensity, but why would you separate? If I discovered my school was run by lizard people in disguise, I don't care if I was naked, I'd be out of there. Now look, I'm not going to hold it against her, okay? Some people, they just want to look good when they're escaping certain doom.
My hair! He shot my hair!
While Augie is changing, he looks up at the speaker in the dorm and gets an idea. But when he goes to meet up with Jazz, he finds her captured by Mrs. Taylor. Jazz bites her captor and the kids make a break for it, but run into Mr. Taylor in another hallway. Instead of capturing the kids, though, he just sort of gloats and lets them run away, and, considering you have a crippling weakness to high-pitched noises, I'm not sure I would have that kind of confidence. Augie and Jazz flee back to the underground section of the school, where they start hearing some growling. The Taylors appear behind them, locking them behind some bars, and we then get a verbal reveal of what the Taylors are.
The last of a race that was doomed to extinction.
I mean, that's not so bad. We share this planet with loads of other species. We can all get along.
We're a race of meat eaters. All kinds of meat.
Guess not. Mr. Taylor says that few children have caused problems the way the Wilsons have, but when they do, they all end up down here. That, coupled with the kids' shoes we saw littering the ground, means that, well, they've all been eaten by the master. Dang, David, that is dark! I love it! We start hearing more growling before a creature emerges from the green light at the end of the hall. As it approaches, the Taylors revel with delight. That is, until Augie breaks out his Walkman and wires it to a speaker, causing the Taylors' fun to quickly turn to panic.
I can't stand.
Just as the Taylors get inside the hall, Augie presses play and rock music blares from the speaker, resulting in Gross. While the master exploded, the tailors appear to have melted. Jazz asks how Augie knew how to defeat them, and he explains that they couldn't stand high-frequency sound. Couldn't stand it? No. No, you leave the room when you can't stand something. They liquefied upon hearing it. I'd describe that as an extreme allergy. Also, why wouldn't you keep earplugs on hand if sound is your kryptonite? I'd have a large pair of earmuffs on the master at all times, making me the best hench lizard. Augie and Jazz head to where the eggs were stored to find them all exploded as well. The kids of the school have come out of their trance and stumble around confused with no memory of what happened. As Augie and Jazz escort the kids outside, the camera follows a trail of broken eggs to reveal... David ends the story by saying, "The end, or is it?" No, it is. It is. If a master and some cohorts couldn't survive this world with its crazy kids and their loud music, that thing doesn't have a chance. Anyway, Gary ends the meeting by practicing his dad jokes.
And, make sure to go straight home, guys. Because tonight's a school night.
What are you all laughing at? Don't humor the Gare Bear like that. You're embarrassing all of us.
Sometimes it's best to keep an open mind.
Now for the review. This episode was great. While I found the weakness of the monsters pretty silly, I guess it was good enough to be stolen by the writers of Star Trek Beyond, when the Enterprise used the power of the Beastie Boys to stop their attackers. Everything else in the episode I found excellent. The acting was mostly solid, the effects were top-notch, and the settings were used to great effect. It's clear that with this and the tale of the shiny red bicycle, David is no longer a baby, but is telling some serious scary stories.
Amazing.
The school setting really worked well for this, and I feel like the school sets are almost always utilized the best in the episodes that they're in. There's just something innately creepy to kids about school hallways, I guess. I don't think the underground sets were filmed at the same place, but they provided the best atmosphere for the creature nest and really helped sell the idea of a vast amount of eggs just waiting to hatch. While I still can't get behind the reason Augie and Jazz were at this school, I found the overall story pretty good. I think any kid knows the discomfort of the first day of school, or being the new kid at school, so when you pair that with the something here isn't right vibe, you get a tale that everyone can relate to. I do think David's stories tend to have pretty weak resolutions, and, this wasn't really any different. The creature's weakness was so laughable that they wouldn't even exist in our world where those sounds are commonplace. I just felt the defeat of the monsters was too quick and too convenient, but it didn't detract too much from an otherwise great episode.
My programming tells me you are correct.
There were more creepy moments in this episode than there were outright scares, but they were all handled masterfully. The makeup effects in this were fantastic and still hold up today. Even the big dopey master puppet looked pretty good. The filmmakers used lighting and camera angles to enhance something that could have come across very cheesy. This episode probably would have given younger me a bit of a scare. I can definitely tell you this, I would have stayed away from grits, and anyone who fingers them. The acting in this episode was mostly good. Augie was probably the weakest cast member, and he wasn't bad, but just like Todd from The Tale of the Magician's Assistant, he was just kind of bland, like not really emoting much to anything. Jazz, on the other hand, was acting circles around Augie, which doesn't really help his case. She gave us a wide range of convincing emotions, and I'm not just saying that because she gave me a death stare. The adult acting was also great here. The Wilsons, they're barely in the episode, so I'm not really going to spend any time on them, but the Taylors, bravo. I love these two. They go from sweet, caring school administrators to maniacal monsters with ambitions of eating children so well that I think they both might actually be serial killers. Yeah. Their performances really heightened the tension in the episode, and I loved every minute of it. This was an excellent story, David. The tale of the hatching meets the approval of the Midnight Society. The Midnight Society members poll on this episode was another split one, but again, those that like it still outvoted those that don't, which means my ruling stands. Great work, David. I look forward to seeing more stories like this from you in the future. Too soon? It's too soon. It's too soon.
Uncool, bro.
I want to thank the following Midnight Society members for participating in this episode's...
Would the following students please report to the headmaster's office? Dave, Ray Fizzle, Andrea, Jessica, Christian, Kyle, Joel, Bethany, Jeannie, Ricardo, Heather, Mark, Jason, Dominic, Ryan, Matthew, Gretchen, Tommy, Jim, Annie, Doug, Bradley, Laura, Seneca, John, Mike, Sherry, Chris, Kate, Nathaniel, Candace, Sean. How do we have this many students misbehaving on campus? Allison, Sarah, Martina, Eric, Becky, Herjone, Ryan, Lidial, Cheryl, Dave, Stacy, Cynthia, Matt, Megan, Trevor, Ashley, and Emily. You've all been seen on school grounds with music-related items and will be serving the master for dinner. That is all.
What did you all think of David's story? Did you see it as a kid? What were some of your favorite tales from the series? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to check out the next episode about the tale of Old Man Corcoran. Until next time, are you afraid of the dark?
If we can.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and a share. Be sure to subscribe and click that bell icon to be notified when more Midnight Society episodes go up. And we've got some other cool nostalgic shows on the channel, so stick around. You might find something else that you like.